all my teaching fraternity, on this subject. And that is exactly what I'm going to do today with you all as well for the next hour. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions if it comes up during the session. Yeah, of course, we will have few minutes at the end of this presentation of my presentation as well to raise questions, but you don't need to wait till the end if you have a very pressing question that needs immediate response. I will do my best in order to respond to your queries as much as possible. Okay, and given the time span that is available and also the large number of participants that we have, I'm not sure how interactive. Be very interested in giving you some space during the course of this hour, at least few occasions where you could reflect on whatever is being presented with your colleagues in small breakout rooms as much as possible without compromising on the time and the subject that we have. So I would like to dive deep into the subject right away. So I will be sharing my presentation right now. And of course, you will receive the presentation later as well. So you don't have to take down everything unless you learn better by writing. Otherwise, I would invite you to stay connected and tuned to the presentation. All of us are familiar with the subject work-life balance. I'm sure almost all of us would have heard of this. But work-life integration is a relatively recent subject. It is an extension of course, work-life balance, but it's very, very different, even at a paradigm level. We will shortly see what the difference is. This whole notion of work-life integration came to me, especially during the pandemic, because that is when this whole idea of we living in a VUCA world came in. Many of us may not be even aware of what VUCA world is. So I'll very briefly present to you what VUCA world is, and then you will all realize this is nothing new that I'm talking about. VUCA is an acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. The world has been VUCA for quite some time, but the pandemic really amplified it. It showed us how vulnerable we are as a community, not only as a community, as a species as well, not in a regional or a local level, but even at a global level. So therefore, especially businesses and the economic structure wants us to believe that this VUCA is the new normal. So we are expected to adjust and adapt to this VUCA way of living, which, of course, I have my own reservations about, but it is important to acknowledge the fact that it is a reality that currently much of the world is definitely VUCA. That is, it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So many things that we took for granted just a few years ago now are definitely VUCA, including our own careers, including our own children. So therefore, it's very important for us to be acknowledging the fact and then look at how do we navigate this harsh reality that we are living in. So when I delved deeper into this, what came up to me first was, how did we end up like this? Because if you look back, even a few centuries ago, life was not this uncertain. Life was not this volatile. It has its own uncertainties, but it's not as rapid as we are seeing right now. Things used to change over, say, decades or even centuries. But ever since the Industrial Revolution, things are changing almost, every year. And therefore, and now we know things are changing almost every quarter or even every day, every minute. For example, something like stock market, every second on a real-time basis, we are experiencing VUCA. So there it is where the notion of work-life integration becomes so significant, because it's so easy for us to really get fragmented in our own selves and also in our own lives. So what my inquiry into what brought us here led to is this. The important question: what did we do to get here? Very briefly, I'm going to take us all back to about 10,000 years ago, where humans were living in the cavemen, or we were living as nomads. Okay, where of course things were all very uncertain, very volatile. But an important thing was there was no distinction between work and life. Actually, work was life, and vice versa. Whole life was spent on finding food, and then procreation, and keep on moving. Then, about 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, something significant happened. When communities became, from being nomadic, started settling down and became agrarian, the economy became agrarian, still work was very much part of life. In fact, people lived in their own workplace, which is the fields, and then every morning, everybody in the family would come together, work in the fields, and everything was part of work, and life was part of, integrated together. Then, if you really look at even until a couple of centuries ago, when the idea of industry came in, the first thing was cottage industries. To the extent that they are still prevalent. If you go to your local, any city for that matter in India, when we go to the local markets, you will always find certain streets, sub-streets, which is homes for cottage industries. It was a little different because people would all come together, work, and then go back, but it was always in their backyard or in their front yard. So still, work was a little distinct from life, but it was not so separated. Then something drastic happened with the Industrial Revolution. That is the idea of factories came in just a few centuries back. Okay, so what was so drastic about it? This is the first time people were removed from their place of living, put together in an artificial setting called a factory for a large part of their waking time, and asked to do repeatedly the same mundane jobs, and then go back to home tired, just to probably have their dinner and sleep. So this is when really the separation, the divorce between work from the rest of the life happened, wherein work became predominant. Even earlier, work was predominant, but it was always part of life. But with the advent of the idea of factory and industry, we found that work became separate from the other part of life, to the extent that we started talking of work-life balance. And we know what it led us to. We led us to the gap between the haves and the have-nots, rich and the poor, the urban and the rural. So the gap became wider and wider. And that, we all know, led to almost all the unrest that we are seeing in the world around us. So this is what really got us to where we are. In other words, we dehumanized the workplaces. The human being was started to be seen just as another spoke in the wheel. The human being's identity as a person was lost. Instead, our designations became our identity. People may not even know your face, but still you have to work together. To the extent, especially post-pandemic, people don't even want to meet face to face. And even when we have these virtual calls, most of us don't want to even turn on our cameras and see another human being. We got so comfortable with talking to a blank screen. To that extent, we have dehumanized our workplaces. Students want virtual classes. There were times, as we all know, that students were so uncomfortable coming back to classes as soon as the pandemic was over. And they were so restless in the classes. It was not easy for faculty members to get back to this new reality, which was actually not new. But it was new for the students because they spent a whole amount of 2 to 3 years just staring at a gadget screen. So that is the level of dehumanization that has taken place even in academia. Forget about what happened in the industries. People, don't even know who they are working with, who's the part of their teams and so on. So to that extent, it was dehumanized. People are nowadays earlier at least we were called human resources, but now people are simply called as a resource. It took me a lot of time for me to even grapple with this notion when my colleagues used to talk, especially colleagues in the IT industry, used to talk about, we had some 3 resources, 2 resources, and I'm looking for this new resource. I was wondering, what are they talking about? Then I realized they're actually talking about people with certain skill sets. Okay, so we are not even considering people as people or, as an employee. We are talking about them as just a resource. To that extent, we have dehumanized the workplaces. Dehumanization basically means removing self and others of the human qualities of dignity, freedom, and compassion. And that is a result of separating our personal lives from our work lives. So therefore, what is the need of the hour? What do we need to do now? And I think we at the academic fraternity front to instill this in all our students, to rehumanize work. The reality is we spend most of our waking time at work. So unless that space is rehumanized, humanity is going to lose its spirit and soul. And that I have made as my personal mission to instill this sense of urgency in whoever I come across. Definitely in the teaching fraternity, because we have the power and the privilege of influencing the minds of younger generation. So what do we mean by rehumanizing work? It is simply relating to self and others as humans again. Because we have done that earlier. Even we have done that as little kids with our own parents and our siblings, with our kith and kin. But we've forgotten, especially when we move out of our studies and get into a job or a career, we get into this dehumanized workspace. So we need to start relating to each other as humans once again, not as a roll number, not as a registered number, not as a designation, but as individual human beings. And that is where work-life integration becomes relevant. And it is the key, in my opinion. And how is it different from work-life balance? Because many of you may be sitting, oh, what is it? We know this already, work-life balance. When we all know how difficult it is to balance work-life and what is this work-life integration. Maybe it is the old wine in new bottle. I too thought of that manner earlier, but the more I delved into it, I realized it's so different. At a surface level, it may sound same, but at a deep paradigmic level, it is very different. And that is what we are going to spend time today to understand and appreciate the difference between work-life balance and work-life integration, and why we need to aim at work-life integration. And this is something that what I'm presenting today is not based on my own whims or subjective opinion. It is based on solid research. So what is work-life balance? We know the moment we say balance, the image that comes to us is this balance, where there are 2 scales and work is on one side, the rest of the life is on the other side, and we are trying to balance both. What's wrong about it? There's nothing wrong about it. But the problem is, when we are trying to balance something, The underlying reality is when one has to improve, the other has to deprove. In other words, when you want to increase something, the other has to come down. When one scale has to go up, the other pan has to come down. That is the stark reality of balancing. But therefore, if you want to maintain both at the same level, it is a constant tension that you are in. It's like a tightrope walk. And that is why I'm sure almost all of us would have experienced at some stage or the other in our lives, even currently, how difficult it is to balance work and life. Because the reality is I spend most of my time, waking time at work. So how am I going to even think of balancing? If I'm spending 8 to 10 hours in the workplace, and let us say I'm awake for about 16 hours a day, practically I have just about 5 to 6 hours outside of work, of which take away about a couple of hours for commuting. So even today I saw many of you are commuting from work, maybe getting back home. So effectively we have about 4 hours to be at home and to do everything else in our life other than work. So trying to balance this is actually a myth. It's a mirage, actually. That is why most of us add more stress when we try to balance and not able to balance. And we develop this new concept called quality time. I only have about an hour with my kids or with an hour with my partner. So how do I make it, balance it? By making it a quality time. Ask all of us, ask yourself honestly, do you think 1 hour of quality time with a child is good enough for the child? Maybe as an adult, we might find and we may convince ourselves saying that is good enough for us, given the other compulsions. But ask the child, is it good enough for the child to spend 1 hour in a day with a parent? So that is what work-life balance leads to. We create more and more myths in order to not accept, or in other words, in order to maintain the denial of an impossibility, which is trying to balance work and life. Because we are trying to balance or control factors which is outside of us, factors which is not under our circle of influence. And that is why work-life balance is often very stressful and does not result in whatever we would want to do. That is where work-life integration comes. So if you look at the picture on the right, it tells you how it is different. When we talk of work-life integration, we are not putting everything other than life in one bucket, as we do in the work-life balance. We are seeing work for what it is, which is work is a part of life. There are several other parts of life. In this diagram, I've given only 4 parts. After work, we have home, community, and self. You can add more and more parts of life if you would want to. For example, the spiritual part of our life. We can add, social part of your life, and so on and so forth. But the idea is work gets its due, which is it's only one part of several other components, which really is integral to our own life. Okay. So therefore, what Stuart Friedman says in the Harvard Business Review, based on his research, and he's one of the pioneers in promoting the idea of work-life integration. He says, balance assumes we must always make trade-offs. As he said, if one has to go up, the other has to come down. Among the 4 main aspects of our lives, work or school, home or family, however you define that, community, including friends, neighbors, religious or social groups, and self, which includes mind, body, and spirit, a more realistic and more gratifying goal is better integration between work and the rest of life. Okay, so otherwise we are talking of trade-offs, and trying to balance in a trade-off is just not practically feasible. Okay, and what's interestingly, Friedman found out from his research of studying several highly successful corporate leaders is that people are successful at their work, not despite having full lives outside of it, but precisely because they do. I want to emphasize on this and spend a minute on driving this aspect, because since people try to work out the balance between work and life, one of the most common myths we again believe, which is very strongly ingrained, is if one has to be successful in career, then they cannot be successful in their private lives, or vice versa. If you want a successful family life, then you cannot be successful in career. You have to compromise. And this almost, become a rule when it comes to especially women. We tend to say, you can't have both. You have to choose between work or family. That is the result of the patriarchal society that we have been in, to such an extent that we are made to believe that is the only way and there is no other way. That is the reality, or that is the fact. But Friedman's research of studying more than 100 highly successful, top leaders, both men and women, concludes that people are successful at their work, not despite having full lives outside of it, but precisely because they do. Because many times when you show some people saying, look, she is having a very successful family as well as career, then people will say, oh, that is a just stroke of luck. It's just by chance. She got lucky. Okay. But what he says is, no, it's not luck. Real success at work comes because of a successful personal life. Okay. So that is important. And that is at the core of work-life integration. So therefore, these are some questions for you to reflect on, not immediately because we don't have the time for, but I'm sure all of us would have done that at some point or the other. What are the challenges that you face in integrating work and life? And maybe what has worked for you so far? So think about this as I'm taking you through the next part of it. And that difference between work-life balance and work-life integration is this. Work-life balance is trying to control something external. How do I manage my time? How do I manage my other resources? Thereby, I can balance work and life, which is outside of us. But work-life integration is based on me, the internal factors, because integration takes place inside, not outside. Things might not change outside. You may still have to get up at 5 in the morning and go to work and then come back home by, say, 7 or 8 at night. Those factors may not change. The amount of time you spend at work may not change. The amount of time that you spend at home may not change. But still, if I'm able to develop this attitude of integration within me, then we will find work and life integrates. And how do we do? And what is the secret? This is the 3-point formula that Friedman presents. The internal integration of work and life takes place when I am able to be myself and bring myself into work as well, not only outside of work. Because many times people put up a very different facade at work and then act in a very different personality outside of work. And that adds to the stress. So the question is, what do I do in order to bring my whole self into everything that I do? One of my trainer, P.K. Saru, used to say, and that is one of my most important life mantras. She would say, the person that I am is what I bring into all that I do. So all the roles that I play, my personal roles, my professional roles, my organizational or institutional roles, all the roles that I play comes only from the person that I am. So am I bringing the whole person into all that I'm doing? Not. Most probably not. And that is why stress increases and we find work is highly different from the rest of the life. So Friedman proposes this 3-part formula to bring in work-life integration. And what are they? Be real, be whole, and be innovative. This is again by studying the lives of hundreds of successful leaders. We'll see shortly what do each of these mean. This has a very uncanny resemblance to some of the models that we are all already aware of. For example, Gandhi ji talked about the 3H model of development. He said, for example, education has to develop all the 3 Hs: head, heart, and hand. And similarly, we also know in transaction analysis, we say autonomy or individual freedom comes from awareness, options, and openness. And of course, the Indian philosophy of Satchidananda also talks about these 3 elements, which has a very interesting connection with the fold formula that Friedman presents to us. So let us look at what does each one of these mean. And as I present each of these domains or pillars or dimensions of how to integrate work and life in the VUCA world, I would also invite you to reflect and share within each other very, very short spans of time what they mean to you, primarily to stimulate your thinking towards work-life integration so that you could carry it forward and then find your own direction to how you could integrate your work with the rest of your life. So this session is only to stimulate and trigger that thought in you, which could fructify later. So what does be real mean? Being real is being yourself, being unique, being true to yourself. Okay? And how do I be real? By asking ourselves, who am I? What inspires me? What excites me? What do I stand for? And most importantly, what qualities and values I cherish? What are the most important qualities and values in my life? That is the question we are asking. What is the most important thing for you? And the work that I'm doing, could it in any way resonate with and contribute to that important value in me? For example, if I say I stand for, and the value of integrity is very important to me, that is at the core of my being. That is what inspires me. Anything that I do with integrity excites me. Because fundamentally, that is what I am. Integrity is what I am. Value at that core level, if I'm able to, then I can say, the job that I'm doing, is it coming from a space of integrity? Am I doing my job with that space of integrity? So for me, it is integrity, but for you, it could be anything. So ask yourself, what is that most fundamental core quality or value at the center of my being? And how does it resonate in all that I'm doing? Is the job that I'm doing, in a way, feeding into this integrity? I would invite you to think for a moment and then share with some of the members in a very short span of time. I'll give you about 4 minutes or so in small groups. Maybe I would create pairs. I will create some breakout rooms, and okay, we will. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few minutes to share with each other this very important question. Maybe we can take a snapshot of these questions so that you could reflect and share in your small group. What are the values at the core of my being, and how do they manifest in my work? Does it manifest in my work that I'm doing rightly? Or if it is not, what do I need to do in order to manifest? Share very briefly, and please see that everybody gets a chance to talk, because we have very limited amount of time. So about 4 minutes. So I'm giving only 2 or 3 members in each group. So each one of you have about a minute to share with each other. Okay. So here we go. Just see how many minutes. Yeah. Okay, here we go. 4 minutes. Start now. Welcome back. Isn't that interesting? We all don't mind turning on our cameras in breakout rooms, but not in the plenary. I've seen this happening in many, many sessions. Maybe that is something for us to reflect on. Wonderful. So I hope you had some meaningful discussions and sharing in the breakout room that through open some insight into what is significant for me in life, feel free to enter whatever came up for you in the chat box. Maybe you could simply enter whatever what was the most important value for you, or any other insight that came up for you, any thought that came up. Okay, so please enter in the chat box so that we have a sense of what it is. We may not have the time to read everything, but I think it would be helpful for us to have. I'm going to continue this. So being real, why is it so important? Be real because a mask only fools people on the outside. Pretending to be someone you are not takes a toll on the real you, and the real you is more important than anyone else. As I said earlier, one of the important reasons of stress and burnout is because we are putting up different faces in different contexts, especially at work. We are totally different from who we really are. So if I could find a way of being my true self in work as well, then you would find the stress of work being totally something alien would not be there. So I would invite you to really look at this. So the second, being whole. What does being whole mean? Being whole is bringing our whole self into all that we do. What makes you whole? Are you acting in integrity? Whole is integrity we often use in the sense of being honest, but it's not only being honest, it is being true to our own selves. Okay, it is being, bringing my whole self into all that I do. Okay, in other words, being whole is exercising all the options that I have at any point of time. Not saying that, there is no other go, I'm helpless, or this is the only way, or I don't know, but exercising, looking at and exercising all the options that I have. And also being very clear about what is more important to me in life. The option of prioritizing things, looking at the right strategy to prioritize things. Okay. And in the process, important question of being whole is, do I choose yourself over others? Especially, we in the teaching fraternity tend to do things for the sake of others, to make others happy. Either it is our superiors or our students or our own family members or the parents of our students. Many times in the process, we lose ourselves. We don't bring our whole selves inside. So we keep aside and leave behind most part of ourselves in the process. And therefore, we cannot be real. When I'm not whole, I cannot be real. So I need to be whole, which means I need to have all my cards up there if I need to be real in the world, either at work or outside of work. Okay. So the question for you to reflect here is, do you choose yourself over the others? Do you choose your peace of mind over any other factor? Do you choose your dignity over others? Do you respect your own thoughts and your own opinions over others? Do you respect and prioritize your own values and your own needs over others? Okay, when you are bringing yourself into your work. We might do many of these outside of work. But remember, most of the time we spend at work. So there, if I'm not whole, then I'm going to be fragmented. Then I'm going to, in due course, forget such parts even exist. I know many people say, oh, it's been years I laughed like this. Okay, so what are we doing when you're saying something like that? So I would invite you to think of this and then share in your small groups. I'm going to get you back into those same small groups, same breakout rooms. Think of this. How am I prioritizing myself? Am I exercising all the options available for me? Am I acting in integrity? Okay, so you still have 4 minutes, and please get into the breakout rooms and share with each other how far you are doing it or not doing it. That's very important. 4 minutes quickly. Here we go. Of themselves. So I know as in the teaching fraternity, That's a very common thing. But I think it's not choosing one over others doesn't mean being selfish or self-centered. It's actually caring for self. And unless we care for ourselves, we cannot be fully present for others. So therefore, we need to be whole by taking care of ourselves. So, moving on. So please feel free to continue to enter in the chat whatever insights that came up for you. This quote by Fernando Pessoa is something very, I love it for not only the poetic metaphor in it, but also it is so true. To be great, be whole. Exclude nothing. Exaggerate nothing that is not you. Be whole in everything. Put all you are into the smallest thing you do. So in each lake, the moon shines with splendor because it blooms up above. So therefore, being whole is bringing your whole self in even the smallest thing that we do. So acting with integrity in all the smallest thing we do. Taking care of us and our interest in the smallest thing that we do. For example, when I used to teach, first thing I would say to all the classes is, I want you to be back in my classroom on time. But I understand we may have exigencies. So I will take attendance in the beginning of the class. So by the time attendance is over, you can simply walk in. You don't even need my permission. But once attendance is taken, you are not going to enter it. So don't keep knocking and standing. I'm not going to say get out, but because you are not coming in. It's as simple as that. So that is respecting you, at the same time also respecting my dignity and my role and my work. So that is a simple way in which we could bring our whole self into what we are doing. So I act with integrity. At the same time, I also act with respect for myself and others. Then work becomes joyful. I don't need to think of doing something extraordinary in order to integrate my work with my life. So that is one of the simplest ways. And this is something, you can't say it any better. Oprah Winfrey said, seek to be whole and not perfect. Many a times we in the teaching fraternity try to think of and impose the notion of perfection, which we all know doesn't exist. It is a myth. But we can all seek to be whole. We can all live up to our own full potential. That is the key for work-life integration. So am I bringing my whole self into even the smallest thing that I'm doing on a daily basis? Then the third one, it's is very important, especially given this VUCA world that we are living in, or the Bani world, as somebody has mentioned in the chat box, we are living in. We need to be innovative. We need to find new ways of adapting and changing ourselves to the reality. The way that we all learned how to work virtually when the pandemic came in. So do we need something inevitable like the pandemic to make us change? Instead, can I be in tune with the changing reality and change my own attitudes? For example, how do I adapt my beliefs and my values to, say, the new generation that we are living with, the millennials, the Gen Z, and so on? How can I change myself creatively so that I am relevant? Relevance becomes a big question, especially when we move into our middle ages, like into our 40s and so on. Then the big question comes in. How relevant am I? Because I've been teaching the same subject for so many years. We can be relevant when we find creative and innovative ways of changing ourselves by not sticking on to the old selves. In other words, what do you do differently? Is there anything new that you have done this year which you have not done the previous year? Or whenever we do anything differently, in other words, whenever we change, we'll always miss something. Often it is a comfort of the old ways of doing things. The recognition, maybe the admiration that I got by doing things the old way. I will be missing it when I change. So therefore, knowing what I will be missing and how will I compensate that? Instead of getting my admiration for my old ways of doing things, can I find new ways of getting my admiration? or my, the recognition that I'm looking for. So how can I be creative in what I do? How can I be creative in what I bring, say, into the classroom on a day-to-day basis? And that is very important. And that becomes also the fertilizer for our own growth, so that I keep myself younger, even when I'm aging. So being innovative, being creative, changing continuously, learning something new all the time. So these are very important aspects for us to be relevant. So ask yourself and share with each other, what is it that I would do differently? And what will I miss if I change something? Maybe my teaching method, if I change, what will I miss? And how will I compensate for what I'm going to miss? Okay, so this is an important question we are going to ask. Let me get you into the small rooms. I'm going to recreate these rooms. Sign you, yes. 4 minutes. And here we go. How to be real, how to be whole, and what do we do in order to be innovative? So when I am real, whole, and innovative in all that I'm doing, especially at work, then you would see our work is integrated with the rest of our life. Because this is what we bring into anything and everything that we do. So eventually we are not distinguishing. Okay. And why is change so important? This is my favorite quote by Albert Einstein. He said, the world we have made as a result of the level of thinking we have done thus far creates problems that we cannot solve at the same level at which we have created them. We shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if humankind is to survive. So if we are thinking in the same way that we created the VUCA world, then we will not be able to solve that problem if we keep thinking in the same manner. Like, for example, we say the economic model is based on more and more and more. So if we are constantly keep thinking on this more model, we will not be able to make any changes. If we want to bring in a sustainable world, then we have to look at a different way of thinking. More of the same is not going to bring in. Yeah, Einstein himself said, definition of insanity is doing more of the same and expecting a desired different outcome. Okay, so we need to change. We need to adapt to the world, real life conditions. So therefore, some more questions for your reflections. What are the values at your core? In a way, summarizing what we have seen. And how would you integrate that value in all that you do? So when I'm able to bring that same value into all that I do, my work and my home, my friends, my community engagement, then I find even if I'm spending less time at home, I'm able to integrate myself with home. Whatever I'm doing at work, it may not be the best job that I like to do, but still when I'm acting from that core value, then I'm integrating myself into my work, into the rest of my life. So it is the values that really connect and integrate work and all other aspects of our life. So therefore, we need to get back to the basics. So many times people ask, okay, how do you do it? Okay, so these are some of the things that has worked for me over the last several years. Okay, and when I started listing them once, for one of the presentations, it really occurred to me, some of it also falls into, sort of a ABC. So I call it the ABCs that work for me, especially at work. What I've listed is that what worked for me. Like asserting my needs at home and workplace. Build a community, both at work and at workplace. Don't have to work alone. So commit to volunteer work, both at home and outside. Choose a job that I like to do 24/7 for the rest of my life. I've shifted my careers at least 2-3 times over the last 30 years. Don't compromise on values. That's the most important thing. Engage in projects that stretch my limits. I don't have to do only what I'm asked to do. I can extend my limits and engage in things that beyond my call of duty. One of the things I tell, my teaching colleagues who used to say that, oh, the university system and the curriculum and all this, it's really stifling. It does not let me to do a lot of things that I want to do. Yeah, I cannot change the curriculum. I cannot change the system. I cannot change the exam or evaluation process. But those 60 minutes that I have within those four walls with my students, that is mine. Nobody can tell me how I'm going to spend those 60 minutes. So can I bring my whole self into it? Can I be real with my students in those 60 minutes? Can I do something creative in those 60 minutes? Because that is going to add value to me. And that 60 minutes in a day is going to give me the fuel to keep me going for the rest of the day. And if I could do it day after day, and that is how I integrate my work with the rest of my life. So another thing I say is free child hobbies to realize my full potential. For example, I engage in trekking, cooking, photography, things, with whatever time that I have outside of work. Even at the workplace, sometimes I go around clicking pictures and so on. I take my students out for trekking. So those are ways we could integrate work into what we are doing. Build healthy habits. I started running when I was 45 years. My students used to wonder. Now I run marathons. I run ultra marathons. Just 2 years back, I ran twice 100 kilometers. Just imagine, it's not possible. We need to create the time. My students started participating in marathons whenever I go. They never even thought about it. So building healthy habits, bringing our whole self. For me, that is what bringing my whole self into whatever I do. Involve family and friends. In our career, involve students, involve your colleagues in all that we are doing. Joyfully celebrate even small successes. Keep good company. That's very, very important. Learn continuously. Every year I have resolved to learn something new. Like this year, just last month, I learned how to swim. People laughed at me. I was the oldest in the swimming pool, but I had no problem. I had real fun. So I learned to swim just last month. Normal goals are not normal anymore. This is something we need to remember. Often there's an occupational hazard, we teach us in our days, we used to be like this. That's not going to work anymore. Or pre-pandemic, I did this. Now I'm not able to do. Yeah, it's not anymore. 10 years ago, I was able to do that. I'm not. Yeah, you are not the same anymore. So we need to reinvent our goals. So normal goals are not normal anymore. And also we need to tell ourselves and others, it's okay to fail sometimes. For me, that is a very important aspect to keep my sanity so that I'm not losing my sleep over, a mistake that I made at work or elsewhere. And most importantly, especially at the COVID pandemic, I realized this: pause and let it pass. I don't have to hurry as if the world is going to come to end tomorrow. I can pause some things so that it will pass by itself. I don't have to do everything. I don't have to be on the top of everything. So when I do all this at work mainly, then I find I'm totally integrated with all aspects of my life. I'm not segregated. I'm not feeling fragmented. So integration is all in us, in our heads. It is what we bring in our being, whereas balance is what we try to do outside, which would just not be feasible. Okay. So the question I'm leaving you with is, what are you going to do differently from now on? Even if one thing that you resolve to do differently from now on, that would make a big difference. And for example, I remember still in the early career, I said one day when I heard certain things on one of those lectures, I said, from now on, I'm not going to take attendance by calling the roll number. And worse, I asked my students to call the roll number because it saves time. Okay. I said, no, even if it is 60 students, I'm going to call them by name. That made a huge difference for me. It made a huge difference for my students because I'm not treating them as a number anymore. So like that, you can think of one thing that you would do differently from now on. Okay, that will bring your whole self into what you are doing. Okay. And once you identify it, go for it. because I strongly believe life is beautiful. With all its, limitations, life is beautiful. And we really owe it to our next generation to rehumanize whatever we are doing, especially at our work, to be our full self, bringing our full self, and then creating that new path for the next generation. Because we are in a privileged position, a career where we could influence and we have the power to influence the next generation. And trust me, students would always look up to you. Not when you pack all the 60 minutes with subject, but relating to them as human beings, as people to people, as a person. And when they see me with all my weaknesses and my strengths, and that is when they respect me. And that is how I integrate work with life. So I'm wishing the same for all of you as well. And you'll all find it your own ways. You will come up with your own ABC list, and that is absolutely fine. And that is how it works. There is no one magic pill. So I'm inviting you to that mission of rehumanizing work and experience the joy of integrating work and life. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. And now I think we'll have maybe a few minutes for some questions. I already see one hand raised, Mr. Datta. Yes, please. Please go ahead. You can unmute yourself and speak.
Yes, sir. I'm speaking from Dibrugarh University in Assam.
Oh.
Sir, I really want to know about your journey in neuro-linguistic programming.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm a teacher of neuro-linguistic programming here at Dibrugarh University.
Oh, what is awesome. Well, yeah, I saw that question of yours in the chat box. Anyway, that is beyond the scope of today's session, but I would be very delighted to know what about NLP you would like to hear, because my experience with NLP is, I'm a master practitioner of NLP. I learned from one of the best, Reverend Richard McHugh from the US. And for me, NLP is a language. Okay, it's not like I'm doing NLP. No, of course, I learned NLP to use in counseling and therapy and training and so on, but I don't teach NLP anymore. I used to teach in the earlier days, but for me, NLP is a language, NLP is a vehicle. So as you and I are speaking, we are either consciously or unconsciously using NLP in our own ways. So when I could consciously use it, then I become a better communicator. So that is how I see NLP.
Yes, sir. Yes,
sir. I'm sure you know that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. You are a good philosopher, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Yes, I see another hand up there. Please go ahead and speak. Mr. Gopinath.
Hi, sir. It was a very nice session, and I'm so happy to be part of this. I have a person who is with me, okay, who always feels whatever she does, she never feels satisfied with her, whatever she does. So how to deal with such person so they are not feeling so satisfied with what they have achieved. So they always say, no, this is not sufficient. So how to deal with the person who has this kind of thoughts, sir?
Are you talking about someone who is not at all satisfied and content with what they have? They're always dissatisfied?
Yeah, means whatever they have achieved, but they still think that, no, this is not my level, so I'm not satisfied, so I still have to, so they can never be happy, right? So how to deal with such person?
Yeah. See, the first thing is, of course, it is a process by itself, but my quick response to that would be, they are the way they are because of their own backgrounds. Okay, so the first thing is for us not to judge them, but accept them. And one of the main reasons why people think that way is somewhere the belief is, it's a very irrational belief that when I am satisfied or content with what I have, then I won't have the motive or the drive to aspire for something more. So what they need to know, and maybe that is what you could do if it is, I don't know who it is, maybe your students or your family members, whoever, what you could do is to help them see that I can aspire more while I am also enjoying what I'm doing. Because my accomplishments become a stepping stone for my next goal. It need not really pull me down. So therefore, and they also need to get a sense that when I celebrate, as you see, one of the important thing in one of my ABC list is celebrating successes. Even if it is small success, celebrate it. Because when I celebrate my small successes, then that gives me the energy for go for the seek the next goal. So I would like you to emphasize that with them. Maybe if you say it once, they may not get it, but we may have to repeat it. And most importantly, the best way for us to inspire change in others is to model to them.
Yeah,
When they see you doing it, celebrating success, and then not becoming complacent because of it, but you are really setting up another target, another goal, then you see people will do that. Like I
yeah,
say, one of the things that I do is every year I decide I am going to learn something new. It doesn't mean that I'm not happy with whatever I have learned so far. No, I'm happy, and that gives me more energy to learn something new. So I think that is the thing we need to instill in them and remove that irrational belief that if I'm satisfied, then I will not be motivated or I will not grow.
yeah. Thank you so much, sir. I asked this question on the topic we have discussed today. So how to be wholesome. So when I wanted to apply this to with the people, so this is the biggest challenge we are facing. That how to make the people satisfied and as well as they can go to the next step. Yeah,
It is
it's a
also partly because the system is designed that way. When
yeah.
people accomplish, we don't acknowledge it. We only push them to the next level saying, why have we not done this? One of the things we are still remember, we do this to kids. When they get 98 out of 100, we say, what happened to those 2 marks?
Yes.
So we are scuttling, children's, tendency or the, what would I say, need to celebrate, to enjoy and validate what they have done. So if you
Yeah.
could do it, validate what you have, then we can always invite them to aspire something more. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for the question. Yes, Professor Raj Lakshmi.
Yes, sir. You are no, you are a walk and talk person.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm able to feel that, and so happy to know that like you made it a point of learning things like swimming. No, you just started learning, and my hearty congratulations for your presentations. It was wonderful. I have a question from your slide. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
the three dimensions of whole life integration in the VUCA world. Okay, the be real, the three diagram.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so be real is I got it, awareness and options, openness, right? And is it be whole is connecting?
Being real is being in touch with our values. Be whole
Okay,
is aware of our options and prioritizing us.
aware of options, okay. And like be innovative is heart,
Be
head,
innovative is
and
what will I do differently? What will I miss? And it's basically about change.
change, okay.
Yeah,
So
continuously
be
changing.
like again, it's a self change. It's
Yes, yes, finding creative
so
ways,
making it.
changing myself. Yeah.
So it's connected with the breakout room. You gave some 6 questions, like what is exciting and
That is the first.
innovative. It is related.
Yes.
Okay, okay. So so the interaction helped me, and I just saw me in a new perception. It was a new perspective, and
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is Ms. Professor Shilpa?
Yes, sir. So, first of all, it was a very nice session.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I have a question, sir. This
Yes.
is a question I want to ask, and I would like you to answer very, very honestly, sir. But don't you think that the concept of work-life balance is totally skewed when we talk about the public sector and we talk about the private sector? Because what I see and I experience firsthand is that with the big corporates like Big Fours and all growing giant and aggressive day by day in terms of their work
Get one
culture and
vegetable.
in terms of their work
Yeah.
culture, sir, how much viability does work-life balance hold? Because then, if these are accounting services and they are catering to clients, they almost make you delete 3 months, January, February, and March from your own calendar in a year. So the burnout is a normal thing, sir. There, how I mean, work-life balance, is it viable?
That's what I started my session with. Work-life balance is a myth. It's especially given this current scenario, it's practically impossible to balance. So that is
Yes,
why
sir.
we need to learn ways of integrating myself into everything that I do. Then I don't feel torn. Okay, then I would prioritize. For example, you said I am expected to wipe off 3 months of my calendar. That is a choice I make, which means I'm prioritizing certain aspects of life over certain other. For example, I'm prioritizing, let me say, money over health, or I'm prioritizing, let me say, goodwill at work over family. I'm taking family for granted, and
Yes, sir.
I'm giving. So that is why when it focuses on work-life integration, then I would make sometimes very tough choices, but we need to make choices. Whereas if you are focusing only on work-life balance, it gives you a false notion that it is possible. And people will talk about, oh, if the prime minister and president can spend time for 1 hour for yoga, why can't you and I do? Okay. They are able to balance, you are not
Yes,
able
sir.
to balance. It's a very, very, very unrealistic target, as you rightly said. Yeah. So that's why, it's a myth. So we need to focus on work-life integration, which is where real change can happen. Thank you.
So even if somebody likes to work for a workaholic and really enjoys their work, I mean, working 12 hours a day, so for consequent, months, how does this integration happen?
I know.
And after all,
So
money is
again,
also important.
see, nothing happens. Huh? One of my teacher used to say, earthquake happens, rain happens. Everything else we do. So, work-life balance does not happen, or integration does not happen. We have to make efforts to do it. So if somebody chooses to be a workaholic, then I really question the notion, are they doing it out of joy and pleasure, or are they doing it out of habit? Workaholics is an addiction, actually. I may not feel the pain because I may get so numb by this whole process. It doesn't mean I'm doing it. I will know it when I burn out, when other aspects of my relationships and other things really burn out. So we need to make conscious choices. Thank you for those wonderful questions. I'm aware of the time, and I think it's time to stop, I suppose. So thank you all. Professor, you are on mute, so I'm not able to hear us. So thank you all for the wonderful, participation and also the questions that you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
And thank you, Professor Balaya. Sir, you're not able to hear you. You are still on mute for this opportunity. Thank you so much. I'm not able to hear you. Yeah.
For your wonderful presentation. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so you gave us a new perspective, that work-life integration, which was very, very meaningful and it's very relevant. I think given the context of the stress, the tensions, and all the conflicting situations that we experience both at home and in workplace, it's an excellent idea to think about integration. Integration will make us better human beings, and integration will give us more satisfaction in life. Thank you so much for giving us and enlightening us with this new perspective. Because most of the times until now, people always over to MC.
Thank you, Dr. Suriyaprakash. Your talk has shed light on the importance of integrating our potentials in a way that promotes well-being and fulfillment. Your inspiring message of being real, whole, and innovative in the VUCA world to integrate work and life was excellent. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Suriyaprakash.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you all